I've hit the record button, Alan. Did you see a notice?
Yeah, we got it.
Okay, okay. I've had meetings before where I was supposed to record and discovered afterwards I hadn't done it. Okay, well, I think maybe in the interest of everybody's time, maybe we should get started. So I'm Steve Veazey from SCORE. I'm an ag mentor with SCORE. My colleague Alan Lamb is on the screen here. He's also an ag mentor with SCORE. And for those of you who might not be as familiar with SCORE, what we do are two primary things at SCORE. We do one-on-one mentoring with businesses, small businesses, and in the case of myself and Alan and some others here, it's ag businesses. And the other thing we do are business education programs or workshops such as this. Our ag mentors in Maine work on things like business planning, financials, marketing, record keeping, financing, getting the capital that people need, and the like. So we do a number of different things in the finance and accounting area. The co-sponsor of this tonight is Cooperative Extension. I was expecting Chris Howard from Cooperative Extension, and I don't see her on just yet, so we'll skip over her. And I'm going to introduce Sherry Fang from Ambrook. And I'm going to ask Sherry to introduce herself a little bit, and then we will get started with the program. But as we go, we want to encourage people to raise your hand and ask a question, or unmute your mic and ask a question. We'd like this to be interactive, and you can also put questions into the chat as we go along. So we'll try to monitor that and answer as many questions as we can real time as we go through. So rather than holding them till the end, I think it'll be more effective if we take the questions as we go along. So with that, Sherry, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. My name is Sherry. I'm here on behalf of Ambrook. It's great to meet you all. At Ambrook, we build financial management software for farmers, ranchers, and other small to medium businesses. And I'm part of our growth team here at Ambrook. So I manage partnerships with organizations like yours, as well as some of our marketing efforts across the organization. Steve, any other announcements you wanted to make before we jump into the presentation?
No, I don't think so. I think we can go ahead and start the presentation and have people start to engage with us.
Awesome. Sounds great. Cool. So let me go ahead and share my screen. For today's session, I wanted to do kind of two main things. The first half of this, I'll talk through some general bookkeeping principles that we recommend as best practice for folks that are getting started with bookkeeping or just trying to get a better handle of your financial performance, regardless of what system you use. And then I'll show you how we implement some of those principles within the Ambrook platform. So you can have some takeaways for how you might want to work it into your own system, or give Ambrook a try if it sounds like it's interesting and compelling to you at the end. But I'll start off with just a little bit of history about Ambrook, and kind of what we build and why. So overall, we build financial management tools and resources for agriculture, with a real focus on family-run businesses and helping you all become profitable and sustainable. The crux of kind of how we got started was that we had noticed a gap in financial management resources that were available to producers. We were founded 5 years ago during COVID. It actually started off by helping folks apply to COVID relief programs, and then found that through that process, that a lot of producers weren't able to produce the balance sheets, the income statements, the financial statements that you need to apply for grants and other lending programs. And so that's kind of where Ambrook was born. We have a lot of different free and public resources to try to document the knowledge that we have gained over the past 5 years of building this product, and try to make those available to anyone. So two things I wanted to flag for this group are, first, Ambrook Education. This is a free resource for learning core financial topics. We've packaged it into some guides about, for example, how do you pull together a balance sheet? What is the difference between cash and accrual accounting? And it really just helps operators up-level their financial management skills. And the URL for that is just ambrook.com/education, if any of you want to check that out. And then the second free resource we've put together is a funding library. So this was basically like an iteration of our first product, where it's a database for operators to find, apply for, and then track funding for different grant programs. As I think most of us know, some of that federal funding is in flux right now, and we're trying our best to stay on top of changes as they happen. So what we have gets updated roughly every week to the best of our knowledge and ability, but ambrook.com/funding is the place where you can find more information about some of those available grants. So in terms of general principles that we implement for financial management and bookkeeping, we really think it comes down to two parts. First, that you want to establish really strong habits and systems for your record keeping, and that ultimately is how you chart a path towards resilience and building a sustainable and resilient business. So what do some of those strong habits and systems look like as best practice that we recommend across the board? I think first, it's really important to track what actually matters to your business. One very interesting dynamic of a lot of agricultural operations is that we're very diverse. You might market many different types of produce and commodities. They might come in different SKUs and pack sizes. They might be on different fields. They might be funded with different grant programs. And it's really difficult to track what matters to your business if everything is aggregated as a whole. And what we ultimately recommend is that while the IRS and tax season tell you that, you know, your net income, your gross profit are what they care about for your returns, that shouldn't actually limit what you track and what you want to understand about your business and where you might understand that you're making more or less money throughout your operation. Another general principle that we recommend is to find ways to automate manual work. So identify places where there are recurring actions that you can try to put on autopilot to spend more time in the field. In Ambrook, for example, we have different automation systems where you can say, okay, every time I get an expense from Shell, I will tag that as fuel. And that way you don't have to keep doing that cycle every single week. And we'd encourage everyone to really look for ways to implement more of those automations within whatever bookkeeping system they're using, even if it's in Excel, setting up formulas for, you know, if the vendor is X, then put it in Y category, can be a really quick way of trying to do some of that automation.
Sherry, could I just ask, we've got some feedback coming from somebody's system. So if you could put yourself on mute if you're not speaking, that will help us. Okay, go ahead.
Awesome. Cool. I think the third principle that I wanted to talk about is getting work done where it happens. We hear from so many people that they show up to their accountant with a giant pile of shoeboxes with all their receipts for their end of the year tax filing, or they just get a pile of receipts from their spouse to go through at the end of every month. We always believe that if you can handle work right where you are and do it just in time, right when it's happening, it'll be easier to understand what to tag because you'll have all the context behind it. And having that habit can really help you avoid falling behind on a backlog of work. And so looking for ways that you can integrate it into your workflow. One principle that we think about is like, how can you do things on your phone, on your mobile app when you're out and about? rather than waiting until you're back home in the office to get things done can be a really effective way of making sure that you stay on top of your books. Another principle is around making it a team sport. Thinking about like ways that you can empower your team to handle bookkeeping and task management themselves. Obviously, you know, we all work for varying size of businesses. I know some of you might be just operating a farm on your own or just with a partner, but even figuring out ways that you can integrate your partner into it so that a task can be handled by the person who is closest to that task every time. It's a great way of making sure that there's no context loss in that bookkeeping process. So one example of this, for example, is in the Ambrook platform, we give folks options to put in receipts, and you can issue different users or permissions across the platform to make that happen. But I'll go into a deeper demonstration of how that works in our product after this. So now that we've talked about some of those habits and systems, what are the actual structures that you can implement to chart a sustainable business? So first, we think tracking your profitability by enterprise, location, and project are really important concepts. I know that Steve at Spore has talked to us about the importance of enterprise accounting and really taking your operation, but breaking it down into the discrete products, commodities, or businesses that you run and tracking the P&L by those different enterprises. We call that enterprise accounting, and ultimately it helps you figure out where you're actually making and losing money instead of looking at things in aggregate, like we said before. Gaining visibility into your unit economics is also really important. So tying everything back into your true cost of production, tying things back into per head, per unit, per piece, or per acre, per piece metrics, so that you can actually understand in every unit that I'm actually selling, am I making enough money? Am I making enough profit to cover all the variable costs that go into producing that? That'll help you get to a better view of what your break even can be and make operational decisions that move you closer to that goal. Setting aside time to experiment with ways to improve your operation, looking into new ideas, new practices. We find that when folks have a better view of what their historical performance has been, you have a little bit more leeway to identify where you have wiggle room to actually implement experimentation. But right now, if you don't have visibility into exactly how your peaches are performing or exactly how a field is performing, it's really difficult to give yourself the grace to know that you have had room to try something new, to try a new practice, to invest in a new piece of equipment, or look towards a new outcome. So this ties back into that concept of enterprise and unit accounting, but what this really enables is further operational excellence through experimentation. And ultimately, that helps you chart a path towards generational resilience. You can take control of your books, start planning for the future, start budgeting, looking for what's next, instead of only using bookkeeping as a way to recap what has happened in the years before for your tax purposes. Really taking a lens of how this has impacted my future can help shift that mindset around how you plan your business and create a generationally resilient platform. So those are just some high-level kind of principles about how we've designed Ambrook, general tactics around, how we recommend folks try to implement bookkeeping. I'll show you what this actually might look like within a bookkeeping system. And like I said before, I know that folks are using different things, but they might be on QuickBooks, they might be on Excel, you might be doing things on pen and paper. And if what's working for you is working, stick with it. And we never hate on spreadsheets. We think that they're a very flexible way of getting things done if that's what's best for your operation. But if you can find ways to optimize that and automate things and make sure that you're tracking things at a granular and helpful level, that's really the principle that we want to drive through when it comes to measuring your farm profitability.
Sherry, we have one question in the chat about the compatibility with other software products like Square. So along this theme of being efficient in gathering information and getting it into your system, they're asking if Ambrook has the ability to process those payments.
Yep. Yeah. So I'll talk a little bit about those connections as I go through the demo, but the short answer is yes, we do have an integration with Square to capture your point of sale transactions. We do have, recommendations about how you use it, because going back to the principle of tracking what's helpful and important to your business, you might not need to track like the sale of every single box of carrots that you've sold in a day, but tracking how that trends over a week, how that trends over a month, thinking about aggregations that are useful to you can help you be more efficient with how much data you're putting into your platform and whether or not it's operating at the level that you need it to be. But yes, we do have a Square integration, and we're constantly building out additional integrations as well. Probably the most powerful integration that we have in the platform is the ability to connect with your bank accounts and your credit card accounts, which feeds into the page that I'm looking on now, which is the ledger. So a ledger is basically a record of all of your different financial transactions. You can see here that there are different accounts that can go into a ledger. You can pull in just a cash account, different bank and credit card accounts, and other transfer accounts as well. But what we really think is powerful about the ledger is the ability to tag transactions into categories, enterprises, locations, and contacts within this view. So I'll walk through what each of those mean and show you a little bit of how we've structured this. So a category really ties into your income and expense categories. Each of these categories can go into your tax reporting. So we've have a set of automated suggestions for how they might loop into your Schedule C and Schedule F. But ultimately, all of these categories are customizable. So you can put your expenses into your own words and make sure that you understand the meaning of everything that you are tracking, and it's set up in a way that is best for you. Within a category, you can split expenses across different categories. So for example, if you have applied fertilizer, maybe fertilizer is not a great example, but if you went to the auto shop and as part of that you had fuel expenses and tire expenses, let's say, you could split that 50-50 or across a different percentage that you set within each category here. Enterprises tie back into that concept of multi-enterprise accounting. So looking at the different units or components of your business that are important for you to track. And so this sample operation has a livestock operation and then a produce operation. And within this, you can similarly do that splitting of, okay, my fertilizer here, I apply 50% to my corn crop and 50% to my peaches crop. You can implement splits that way. Or even at a acre level by different unit metrics that you might set. So here for livestock, we've set it across acreage of pasture that they might be on, but you could set this to per head, for example, if you want to calculate per head costs or per unit costs across any of these different line items. You can also track different location tags. We find this to be especially helpful for any folks that are renting or leasing any locations. So this way you can actually figure out, okay, am I making money on this field that I'm paying $1,000 in rent to every single month? Am I actually breaking even on that investment? We've heard from customers that have started using location tags and then realized, wow, I was actually really in the red for a certain field that I was cash leasing. And now that I have that information, I was finally empowered to say, okay, no, we need to stop renting this and we need to get out of this field. So thinking about ways that you can use this to empower different decision-making is really helpful within the platform. And then we also have additional tags that don't show up unless you have things tagged into them, but for project and funding. So projects tie generally into NRCS practice codes. So if you, for example, are doing a drip install or greenhouse upgrades, by tagging all of your expenses into one project, you can then see in aggregate how much you've spent in one project and track that over the implementation of it. And similar for funding, this way you can track, for example, okay, everything I got from my eQuip grant is going into this one funding bucket. And especially if you are in any reimbursement or cost share based programs, the funding tag is really helpful for making sure that you're actually getting all the money that you're owed for all of the transactions that you have spent within that. Going to that principle that I talked about automating whatever you can. We have an automation system here that we're continuing to improve on every single day. But if you, for example, are always tagging this fertilizer expense into a certain location or into a certain enterprise, our system learns and recognizes that that is a common application and will suggest those tags in the future, or you can set up your own automations to go do that instead. Other things that I'll show within this ledger is the ability to associate receipts into all of these transactions. And so you can both tie receipts into the specific transaction in the ledger, or just stick it here in this drop box for receipts. And what we really like being able to do, I'll show you this example. Our system will, if you upload a picture of a receipt, which you can upload from your phone or from the desktop app, like the website, we will pull out those line items in a receipt and automatically read how much they were for each line item, pull out like tax as a separate line item as well, and you can edit these to make them more interpretable. But each of these individual line items can then also be tagged against different categories and enterprises to make sure that you're getting a really granular and helpful view of what you're associating within your business. What all of this ultimately empowers is analytics about how your operation is performing. So this is a high-level dashboard of, for example, how our net profit and working capital are performing, income and expenses by month. And then what I really like is the ability to see those breakdowns by enterprises. So in this situation, you can see, hey, this person actually isn't making that much money on their trucking business. If anything, they have a negative 5K net loss on trucking. So is that actually an enterprise that they should continue to be in? Similarly, you can see, oh, wow, peaches and tomatoes are actually what's carrying the majority of profit within this enterprise. Maybe that's a place where you want to keep investing in and grow the business even more. Similarly, we can do those same breakdowns on locations and any of the other projects or funding tags that we had talked about earlier. But this is how you can see, okay, the orchard is performing really well, but the greenhouse isn't. What does this mean for how our business should move forward? And how can we continue to get visibility on each of these decisions to make sure that our bookkeeping is helpful to us? I know all of us are also in the midst of tax season right now. It's top of mind for everyone. What this ultimately does also do is pull into accounting standard profit and loss and balance sheet reports. And these both break down by month or for the P&L. You can also break it down into those different tags as well. So you can see a P&L for your enterprise, location, project and funding, and see all of those line items and costs for how they break down and your ultimate net margin and bottom line at the end of the day.
Sherry, will it create a Schedule F?
Yep, it will. I can show you. It won't show because I'm only sharing this window, but if you go into your settings and then export, you'll see all of these different reports that can get exported. So not only your P&L and balance sheet show up, but also your Schedule F breakdown can be exported here. Oh, I see one question in the chat about beginner bookkeeping classes. These are kind of a initial way to test if people are interested in beginner bookkeeping classes. Our Ambrook education resources are probably the best place to get help with getting started on bookkeeping. But we are always trying to solicit feedback from the community. And so if like having more detailed bookkeeping classes is something that folks are interested in, we can definitely bring in our accounting experts and continue to do more sessions like these with Score Main to help people get through it. And I'll add a note about that at the end of the demo on how you can continue to engage and ask questions about these. But that's a great idea. I love the idea of helping people through this. I'll jump into another part of the platform, which is our payments platform. So not only are we a bookkeeping and record keeping system, but ultimately we want to be empowering your end-to-end financial management. And we think that payments are an incredibly critical part of that. And there's so many, pain points with how AR and AP work with agricultural operations today. You might cut a check for someone that doesn't get cashed for another 3 months. And then you have to think back, oh man, what is this $800 bill coming out of my bank account even for? And having that, that time delay between when you have context and when something happens can be really difficult for people to plan for. Or even if you're doing a lot of payments over Venmo and PayPal, when you're going back and doing reconciliation, it can be difficult to tie back, oh, what was it that this person actually bought and sent me $20 for? We believe that if you can integrate your payments into your bookkeeping, that helps you get a lot smarter about what exactly is going in and out, and a lot easier for you to do that categorization and that tagging. So I'll walk through invoices, billing, and then our wallet product within this. So invoices, this is a good way of seeing how much money is still outstanding for your accounts receivable. So you can draft an invoice, and you can both send these within the platform. They send by email to customers that you might work with, or you can save it as a PDF and just save it within the platform, just so you know for your own record keeping that you were due money from someone for your accounts receivable. The way our invoices are structured are that we have specific line items. These line items you can set all of the tags for. So if you're doing a CSA sale, you can preset how much of that is going to be corn, peaches, potatoes, tomatoes, and what fields they're going into, and what the price will be. And that way, all you have to do is type in the quantity of how many CSA memberships you want to be invoicing someone for. Payment options, we accept both ACH transfer, credit card payment options, and we also allow for check and cash payment in here as well. Ultimately, what you can then do with some of your invoices are because we have that view of your ledger and the money that's coming into your bank account, we see that you've received a payment from someone. Our invoices will suggest matches for that payment to an invoice that you've already sent out. I don't know if this one will match because we don't always have it's a demo account, and so we don't have real data behind this, but it would look for any transactions that are related to income or come from this customer, and you can ultimately do that matching really quickly and easily within the system. By also tracking what you've sent out and what is overdue, you can keep tabs on, where you're still due money and how much should be coming in. Question in the chat. So you can create customer profiles and track what they're continuously buying. Yes. So here you can see some sample customer profiles, and then you can set up different reports to be tied towards different customers. So in the ledger here, for example, I don't know which of these have actual transactions against them, but you could, okay, Carly is a fake account, so we don't have a transaction there, but you can filter here for all of your customers and then see a report for how much they have been purchasing. And yeah, here's an example of Anna Anderson. You've tied that into a specific invoice. And because that contact is now associated with that invoice, you can do a filter and see, okay, this person has purchased 4 CSA subscriptions in these 4 different months. The other side of invoices is bills, so what you are actually owing. And we have a similar setup here for bills where you can both tie those to static line items and associate them into specific vendors. So you see folks that you are typically paying every month, and you do that same reporting and exporting within the ledger. One other thing that we like within the bill function is that we will actually cut a check for you to mail out in a bill. And that way you don't have to wait for someone to cash that for you to see that transaction come out of your account. We will have a record of, okay, you have paid this person, the money is outstanding, this is money that you've already owed. And we will even mail that check for you if you choose to pay it that way. So you can see the payment methods here are ACH transfer, we've waived the fees on that, mail check, where you don't even have to go to the post office to do the mailing and we can handle ourselves. Or you can also do a printed check, which is on certain types of check paper. You can just print it out and then, cut the check and mail it out yourself.
So should I enter bills when I receive the bill or when I'm ready to pay the bill?
You could do either. If you've received a bill, but you aren't actually ready to pay it, you can keep it in like a unpaid status here, just so you then know and have in the back of your mind that you have to save this amount of money to have to pay that bill later on. So it serves a little bit of a tracking purpose, but it's really up to you to determine what would be most helpful for you in managing that. And sorry, I'm walking around to try to find a charger before my computer dies. So you're getting a little tour of our Ambrook office in the background. But that's a great question. I see that there's some other questions.
Yeah,
Oh,
let's see.
sorry.
We
So the
got some in
sound
the
cut out.
chat.
You can all still hear me, right? I saw there's a
yeah.
comment about the sound cutting out.
Yes, I think we're hearing you, but somebody had put something in the chat about having a break in the sound.
Okay, it might have been when I was walking around, but as long as you all can hear me now. Can you set up recurring invoices? That is something that we're actively building right now. It's not launched within the product right yet, but we have heard that feedback from customers and are working on setting up a recurring invoice system to just automate that.
And likewise, recurring payments. So if I'm making the same loan payment every month on a loan, are those sort of set up to automatically happen, or how does that work in your system?
Yeah, that's also part of what we are building. If for example, you have something on auto pay though, and it's drawing out of your bank account at a regular cadence, that's also going to be captured within the ledger as well. So you could do all of the tagging of categories and enterprises and whatnot that you need within the ledger. But we are working on setting up automated bills as well. One thing that is also helpful to mention about bills is that you can both enter manually. But you can also just upload like the raw document or image that you might get for your bill, a CSV template of a spreadsheet, or just forward an email into a personalized email inbox for your account. And then that way the bill will populate within Ambrook as well. Here's an example of that matching that I was talking about, by the way. So here's a bill that someone received for their utility bill payment. We then recorded a transaction in a ledger for a check that was cashed. And this way we've automatically associated that bill into that check. So you don't have to, do the hunting for what was this check cashed for and where did it come from and what was the actual use case. The last piece that I'll touch on is here in what we call Ambrook Wallet. So Ambrook Wallet is basically like an operational cash account, maybe similar to how you might use PayPal or Venmo if you keep a balance in there. In your wallet, you can then pay out bills from your wallet balance or receive money in invoices. And we actually are offering a 1% APY on your balance. So it's a little bit better than just keeping something in a PayPal or a Venmo. And another benefit of setting up Ambrook Wallet is that if you run an operation where there are multiple employees, you can also issue employee cards as part of this. And you can permission each of these employees differently. But this way, if you have folks that are making their own transactions, they can go and go to the store themselves, make that transaction and scan in a receipt and do that tagging on their own without you having to go back and find them. So that comes back to the principle of making bookkeeping a team sport and involving everyone within your operation to help out with that process. I'll pause here and see if there are any questions. These are kind of the main features behind Ambrook. So the bookkeeping and then the payments platform. But we would love to hear kind of thoughts and feedback from folks as we are always developing this product and trying to orient it around what customers want and what they care about.
So Sherry, a lot of farms have payroll. So you need to speak to, you know, how they're going to get their payroll transactions into the records.
Yeah, great question. So we don't have a native payroll module within the platform, but it is something that is on our roadmap to build this year. For now, the way that we see it is it's a kind of bring your own payroll type of system. So we integrate really well with Gusto and ADP, for example. But here's a specific payroll example. Basically, you can export a payroll journal report from almost any payroll provider. Then we will automatically parse that payroll summary into those line items almost in the same way that we do tagging for a receipt. And then we tag those into employee wages and for those specific employees as well. And so you can still keep track of all your payroll expenses this way. But we are working on building out a payroll module for you to not have to integrate within Gusto or any other payroll providers.
Sherry, you said it integrates with Square. What about importing from QuickBooks if someone wants to make the change?
Yeah. QuickBooks understandably makes it quite difficult for you to take your data outside of their platform and integrate it into any others. Kind of two thoughts on that. First is honestly, what we see with a lot of customers coming from QuickBooks is that it's helpful for them to start over and set up a new system for how they might think about their categories and enterprises, especially because your chart of accounts in QuickBooks might not be customized to what you actually need and what you understand. And most QuickBooks plans don't support this enterprise tagging concept as well. And so we do recommend that folks try to start over. And because all of these historical transactions are imported in from your bank ledger and your credit card statements, we find that you don't actually need a lot of those historical inputs on QuickBooks. That being said, if you do, for whatever reason, need to have that list of transactions, you can input transactions in a like bulk CSV upload. QuickBooks, however, doesn't let you export your chart of accounts tied to those transactions. And so you would still need to re-tag the categories and enterprises for those as well. We do have bookkeepers and accountants that are certified on Ambrook that have helped people do that transition from QuickBooks before. And so if that's also a service that you might need or would be interested in, we have folks on staff who can help do that process for you. Although I will say it can get a little bit expensive if you have a lot of transactions that you're trying to import. So we do generally recommend that folks start over or do the bulk CSV transaction.
And the chart of accounts is totally customizable, I assume.
Yep, I can show you. So we will ask, we give a quiz in the beginning for anyone who first joins the platform and learn a little bit more about what type of business you have, what type of income and expenses you might have, and we'll suggest a preset chart of accounts. But you can see here, all of these are ultimately editable. So you can create new categories, retitle them, make them subcategories, and we can help you figure out how those tie back into Schedule F and C. With our automated recommended chart of accounts, we do already have those Schedule F and Schedule C tie-ins available. But yes, all of this is customizable, and we think that's a really important principle behind getting to understand your own books and what they actually mean.
What do you advise people, Sherry, about I mean, this chart of accounts that you're scrolling through right now has an awful lot of detail, and it strikes me as maybe it's too much detail. So how does somebody get the right balance of the, in the chart of accounts between the right amount of detail versus too much detail?
Mhm. I love that question. I think it really comes back to that principle that we talked about earlier of think about what you want to track and think about what you care about within your business and then structure your bookkeeping and record keeping system to solve for that. So as an example here, if you don't need to break out your veterinary expenses into medication and the veterinarian costs because you're like, okay, either way, I'm going to pay for the vet and there's nothing I'm not going to change my medication plan, even if it's costing me a lot of money, then maybe you don't even need to do that breakdown and you can just keep it as one line item, or you could even continue to roll it up into your cogs and create like a bucket for fixed cogs that you aren't interested in changing or amending, and then another one for variable cogs. So I think it does always come back down to what level of detail you want to be able to track. We do have some people that get really, really detailed with it. I was just on with a customer yesterday who, within his car and truck operating expenses, for example, he listed out every single piece of equipment he had, and underneath that, the fuel, the maintenance, the insurance expense. And he found that helpful because he's like, I'm trying to figure out if I should actually get rid of one of these, one of my tractors. And for me to know how much I'm spending on it, I need to have those different breakdowns and that level of granularity to feel comfortable making that decision. So I do think it all comes down to, it's very personal. It comes down to what you want, what you think you can manage, and what you ultimately want to know about your business.
So what's the advantage of Ambrook over QuickBooks?
Yeah, we think that it comes down to first just ease of use, like supporting a lot of automation features, being more intuitive for people to navigate and figure out how to use and tag, being able to set up your own categories and enterprises in your own words, we think is a hugely valuable value proposition. Supporting multi-enterprise accounting is something that QuickBooks doesn't have, except on their most expensive plan. And we think enterprise accounting is really fundamental to how an agricultural business operates. And so that's something that's available at every single tier of plan that we have. And then we also think that there's just features that are better customized for ag. So that's Schedule F reporting. One thing I didn't show here in accounting was the ability to do accounting on both a cash and accrual basis. As we know, accrual basis is so important for understanding how your agricultural operation runs. And so being able to really quickly do that toggle is really helpful. And all of these different payment products, we think, integrate really well within the principles of financial management and just having an integrated picture of your finances on Ambrook.
And of course, the cash basis numbers are what are utilized for most farms for their tax returns. So they have to have the ability to be able to generate both cash and accrual.
Steve,
Exactly.
from your perspective, what are the implications of not having the payroll in this system?
Yeah, I think it's because it can be put in by journal entry. It's not the fact that it's not integrated, at least at this point, is not critical, I don't think. Payroll's is a whole separate accounting system unto itself, and it takes some expertise to run a good payroll system. So if you're relying on one of the big payroll providers, that's great, and you can put it in by journal entry twice a month and move forward.
Yeah, we do know it is a little annoying to have to keep, just another piece of software and have another expense. And so we definitely are working on building payroll and know that that's important. But like Steve said, want to make sure that we're building it right. And for now, think that we have a sufficient enough stopgap to work around that. But that was a helpful question.
So could you go back to the reports just a little bit? You know, such an important part of an accounting system is be able to utilize all of this good data you've put into the system to help you manage your business. So, you know, what do some of the reports look like that I might use to manage my business once I've captured all this data?
Yeah. Ultimately, these accounting reports are really helpful, especially in any of these different cuts by enterprise location project for you to guide how you want to be making decisions. I find that, you know, for people that are starting out or less comfortable with accounting principles, these analytics dashboards are honestly fairly comprehensive in terms of getting the different information on like profit and loss per enterprise that you might need to make a different decision. But we do definitely care about supporting those flexible reports and accounting. And so looking at your profit and loss by these different tags, looking at it across different time periods can also be helpful to see your quarter on quarter or month on month profitability and volatility there. And then I think someone had also mentioned, you know, looking at a view of your customers and the reports that you might want to run there. And so you can run a report on any of these different cuts of data within these filters. But if you wanted to see how much of your annual sales are going to one customer named Anna, and you know, maybe that means that you now want to create a special retention discount to make sure that Anna is sticking with your CSA boxes and you want to prioritize her as a VIP customer. That's another example of a decision that you might be able to make based off of different reports that you might even be able to see on a customer or sales level basis. Basically anything here you can just download and export it as a view.
Do you have an accounts receivable aging report?
We don't, but that is a great, great idea. We can kind of work through it by doing a accounts receivable view by these different dates. And then checking across different time periods how that is changing.
So this is one of the issues I see with some farm clients is that they do sell on account, and so they have receivables, but they're not doing a good job of keeping track of the receivables. And when we take a look, we find that there's some things that slip through the crack that are old receivables that got passed over for one reason or another and never got collected. There's an opportunity there to go collect some money that you're owed. And so that's where it comes up, is if they look at their accounts receivable aging report, they can easily see by customer what's past due and therefore what requires some management attention.
Yeah, definitely. This overdue tab tries to capture some of that, because since all these invoices are associated with a due date, you can see when people have and haven't paid and how overdue those balances are. And you can still apply that same filtering by customer and by date within this tab, but I like the idea of formalizing that into a AR aging report. Any other questions from the group? The last thing I wanted to just do a quick view over. I go back to this document. I would love to be able to just continue to share these resources and collect feedback with folks as you learn a little bit more about Ambrook and what bookkeeping systems and tools that you might like. So we are piloting this concept called Ambrook Community, which is a space just for folks within SPOR Maine to follow up with us with any questions. There's a discount code on here for a free month of Ambrook if you want to just try it out and see if it might work for your operation without any strings attached. And then we also have a onboarding that we're holding for now on April 1st. That would just be for SPOR Maine members who are interested in setting up Ambrook for their operation and seeing how it would operate. So I'll send a link to our community group in the chat. But if folks want to join and ask additional questions there, even if you think of it days or weeks after our session together. We would love to have your participation on that. I see one other question in the chat. Are you able to issue a gift certificate through this program? The way that you would handle that is basically by in an invoice, you would change the price of an invoice and show that as a discount. We don't have coupon codes built into the platform, but I think that's a really good idea for something that we can put onto our product roadmap.
So please, anybody that, if you have a question or a frustration about how you're keeping track of something in your books or records, and how it might work in Ambrook, please ask. We've got a few more minutes here of Sherry's time, so let's. There's no dumb questions. Ask away. And just unmute yourself and ask if you'd like to as well. It doesn't have to be in the chat. Anyone?
I'm not sure if I have wording, exactly formulated for this question, but I'm curious about, like, with different customer profiles, are you able to create different price classes, for example? Like, could you, for different items that you sell, could you say one customer gets like a bulk pricing tier, and you could be classifying the same items with different price classes? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's a good question. The way that you could handle that is by basically creating new line items within your invoice. And so if I show you this, within CSA, you might create one line item for monthly membership, bulk tier, monthly membership, premium tier. And then that way you have two different price points for those. And you can always associate those into specific customers, so that a customer will always get that line item.
So it's
here.
like wholesale versus retail pricing.
Yeah, these line items are fully customizable, and so you can set, two different line items for two different price points here.
Yeah, so many of our clients are selling both wholesale and retail. So, if I'm selling tomatoes, I have to have the ability to create invoices with wholesale prices and also invoices with retail prices.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think creating two different line items would probably be the best way of handling that by now, but it's an interesting use case. I'll think on if there's like a better tag or toggle for that. That would be helpful here too. Thank you for your question, Emily.
So Sherry, another thing I saw was on the enterprise data, when we looked at the P&L by enterprise, there was a column for untagged items. So, what's that all about, and what do we make of that?
Yeah, so that can help you identify where you haven't completely finished your reconciliation and where you still need to go through and do some tagging. And so that's honestly just kind of a helpful filter for completeness that we like to have. You could also set up, for example, another thing that we recommend to most folks is to actually set up an entire enterprise for overhead. So for anything that doesn't actually fit into a specific enterprise and is set something that you have as a overhead cost to just run your operation, like rent would be a good example of just something you might classify into an overhead enterprise. You can set up an additional construct for that as well.
So things like rent, real estate taxes, insurance, accounting fees to get your taxes done. There are a number of things that don't really relate to a specific enterprise, but they belong someplace in this it's categorized income statement.
Yeah, exactly. And there's probably then going to be a big intersection between your overhead enterprise and then any overhead OpEx that you might have. But we see in some cases that, you know, there are other expenses that just fall to the business overall, and you want to separately pull out of your P&L for
And
your
once you-
enterprises.
So once I have this P&L on the screen, am I able to collapse categories like G&A?
Yeah.
So I could collapse the G&A category down to just the G&A line total, not see all that detail? Yes, there you go.
Yeah.
Okay.
Great question. Yeah, you can collapse both the line items and then also the category or the enterprises. So if you remember, livestock was both cattle and goats. And so you can evaluate the livestock enterprise as a whole, but then also those specific commodities.
Mm. Yeah, I think that's a helpful feature because if there's too many categories in that profit and loss statement, you kind of lose track of the forest for the trees. And so looking at it on a collapsed basis really helps, you know, get your attention on the right line items, and then you expand those line items to drill down.
Yeah, yeah, that's a great point. Now it's so much easier.
Yes.
There you go.
You can do the same thing in a competitor's product, I'm sure you know, but it's an important feature.
Definitely.
Other questions that people have? Now's the time.
One thing I'll quickly voice over, since I didn't mention this before, but another benefit of Ambrook is that you can invite your accountant to it and they can do your books. You can invite a bookkeeper as well to help you keep track of the actual bookkeeping tasks. And we have a program through Ambrook called Certified Advisor, where bookkeepers and financial professionals have to take a certification quiz to be a certified advisor on Ambrook. And that way, if you're in need of someone who can do bookkeeping but also knows the system, we can help you match your bookkeeping services, or you can even bring your accountant / bookkeeper onto the platform, and they can, you know, find additional clients that they might need as well. Oh,
Got a question in the chat on pricing. Yeah.
Yeah, great question. So let me just pull up our pricing page. We have two different tiers. There is a starter tier and then a premium tier. And the real difference between starter and premium is first that you have 3 bank connections on starter versus unlimited on premium. And then the invoicing and billing functions are a premium only feature as well. Monthly, the starter is 60 per month and premium is 100 per month. We, for Score main folks, will give you your first month free. You sign up through the link that I had sent within the chat. And that way you can just give it a try and see if it works out for your operation. But we've generally tried to price it such that it's a little bit more affordable than QuickBooks, although I know some people are on, you know, lower tiers that might be cheaper on QuickBooks. We try to give you a good balance of features with kind of customer support and being really responsive and frankly just caring a lot more about our customers and what your experience is and how we're building for you than a big corporation like QuickBooks might be doing. We are trying to always provide value to folks who need it through our free offerings like Ambrook Education and Ambrook Funding Library. So I'll send those links out as well. And those will be free forever. And so if you just want to get help, you know, starting as a smaller producer, those are definitely resources that will continue to add value to and add material to as we grow.
So one follow-up question here, Sherry, is on the starter program. If my farm business also has a credit card, does that count as a bank connection?
That would, yes.
Yeah. And are those transactions downloadable like bank account transactions are?
Yep, you can export basically your entire ledger. And so if your credit card transactions are in here, you can export those out.
And how do I, if they're downloaded, do I review and approve them in some way before they actually get entered into my books as transactions?
Oh, you mean if you're not automatically including your credit card statements? If you are just, uploading a download of your credit card statement into the ledger,
Yeah.
you can basically review with this flag here. There's just a flag to review anything that, doesn't have complete tagging on categories or enterprises, as an example. And that can be one way that you go through your books and make sure that everything is clean and accounted for.
Okay. Other questions? Okay. Well, we've spent the hour, and if there are other questions, we could stay for a few more minutes, but it looks like we've come to the end of the questions. So I'd like to thank Sherry for her presentation tonight and for this introduction. Several people have been asking about, they've been seeing on social media some promotions from Ambrook, and they're wondering what it was all about. And so this was an opportunity to give them a little introduction to an alternative bookkeeping system. So I thank you for your presentation tonight, and I would encourage anyone who has follow-up questions to email either myself at SCORE Maine or to Sherry, and we'll get you an answer to your question.
I've dropped my email in the chat, but it's just sherry@ambrook.com. And you can also ask questions in that community channel that I had linked above, but feel free to reach out however is easiest for you. But thank you all so much for taking the time to listen to the presentation, and thank you, Steve, for having me.
Yes, thank you for doing this tonight. I appreciate it. So I think with that, we'll call it a wrap. Thank you very much, everybody, for attending.
Bye all.
All
Have
right.
a good night.
Good night, all.
Thank you.